Hey everybody, and welcome to Comic Crash, my little show on the internet where we talk about comic books and stuff. Over the last couple of months, I've been raiding my personal collection as well as going out into the world to try and find comic books that I can flip and resell online for a profit. After that was done, I took the profits and I was able to use that as souvenir money when I went to amazing Las Vegas Comic Con. I learned a lot about the process of reselling comic books, what that life is like, what all of that is about, and I learned a lot of really interesting things. And I've come up with a list for you guys, a list of 5 things I learned about comic book reselling and the reselling market with comic books, as well as a lot of things I would have done differently. So if you ever think about trying to do this yourself, make sure you check out this video first and see what my tips are about. Let's hop into it. Thing number 1 that I learned about this whole experience is that reselling comics is not a side gig. Between scouring thrift stores and yard sales and online marketplaces to find new inventory and pricing comics and looking up prices for comics, as well as listing them and taking photos and all kinds of stuff involved with it. After all is said and done, this takes a lot of time, especially if you were doing it the way I was doing it. Because you see, I needed to make a lot of money with this quickly. So I listed a lot of things all at once. And if you tried to do that, if you're trying to create like a big storefront for yourself very quickly, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of hours. And if you're like me, where you're working several jobs and you're trying to get more work, you're trying to establish yourself, and you guys remember the one week when my car broke down, and that was a huge setback to everything I was doing, like all across the board. It's a tough way to try and make some extra cash. It's not easy. If I were to try and do this again, I would not list a huge storefront all at once. I want to try to do it all at once like I did. What I would do instead is I would go incrementally. A couple here, a couple there. I want to try to list like dozens of comics all at once. And the second point, comics are not worth as much as you would think they are. Sometimes you get lucky, most of the time you don't. And this kind of has a two-edged sword to it. The first is that when you're trying to resell the comics, you can't really expect too much more than what you paid for it. And the flip side of that, everyone seems to think that having an old comic book automatically makes it worth something. It doesn't. Sometimes comics just really don't hold value. Sometimes the paper can be worth more than the book itself. And that is rough because like comics, people charge a lot of money for comics up front. And so when you try to resell them based off of, a higher already price that someone else is selling them to you for, you don't make a whole lot on top of it. You make cents on it. And at first, I tried to justify this by saying, okay, well, I mean, profit is profit. If I make 2 cents off of a comic, that's 2 cents that I didn't have before. But if you factor in all the time commitment that it took, and you factor in all of the energy that it took to list them, and then, shipping and all of that stuff, it's really, really hard to justify that. What I would do differently, I would only sell the comics that I knew would be worth some. And not only that, not only would I be a lot more selective about the comics that I'm selling, I would try everything I could to make those comics worth more. There's a couple of things I noticed you could do. You could get them signed by somebody who's important and relevant to that book, or you can get it graded. And I would probably start thinking about going the route of grading if I were you guys. By far, the most expensive comic that I sold, I was able to sell that one issue of One Punch Man for about $66. If I got it graded though, it would have went up to about $125. So significantly more just by having a professional look at it and say, yep, it's in good condition. The third thing, and unfortunately I can't find a good fix for this, has to do with all of the startup cost that it took to make this happen. Comic books require a lot of extra supplies to ship, like regular books and regular items don't really need. You have to get poly bags for them, you have to get boards, you have to get cardboard backing boards so they don't bend in the mail, you have to get the right kind of envelopes, you have to sometimes get bubble wrap depending on the comic it is. So like it's really expensive to start that up. And I didn't really try to factor that into my costs, but trying to come up with the cardboard backing boards and coming up with the bags and the boards, I had to buy a lot more bags and boards than I usually have to, and that was really, really annoying. And there's not really a good fix for that, unfortunately. But again, like I said, only selling books that you know are going to be worth something and that you can make an increased profit off of, that will go a long way to help you out. Fourth thing that I learned is that while comic books are great, people care more about superhero merchandise. They care more about backpacks, they care more about toys, they care more about video games, and you can sell these things for more than you can for comics. So that is something to consider. If you're going to resell comics, go for it. But the same audience that's buying comics is also going to be buying action figures. So, you know, if you have action figures or you find toys lying around, that might be a side market that is worth looking into. And the fifth thing, this one's a positive. Let's end on a positive. The fifth point that I learned is that the goal works. You can do this. I was able to take a huge amount of comics that I don't care about, and I was able to give most of them a home that was with people that did care about the books. And as a consequence, I got more space in my personal library for things that I care about, as well as more funds to get things I care about. So it really is a win-win scenario if you can go ahead and do this. You give comic books to people who really want them, and you get more room and more funds for the stuff that you want. Alright, so let's go ahead and recap the points and some of the tips and things I think you should be aware of if you're going to try and do this yourself. Point number one, this is not a side gig. It takes time, it takes energy. The way to combat this is if you have time and if you have the patience to, just do it slowly. Upload only a couple of comics here and there and you'll be just fine. Point number two, comic books are not worth as much as people seem to think they are worth. So make sure that when you're haggling down for prices that you get a fair price for what you know is going to be in it. Make sure you do the things to try and boost the cost and the price of these comics by getting them signed or getting them graded before you start selling them. Point number three, the startup cost is way more than you would expect it to be, but if you make sure that you upload primarily books you know are going to be worth something and you're going to get back your investment on, this shouldn't be a problem, especially if you order in bulk. Point number four was merchandising. Merchandising is worth way more than the comic books themselves, but if you want to focus on comic books, go for it. That's a great niche market, but be aware of that and look into like some of the other markets. And point number five was that this is actually a really good way to clean out your collection, and it's a great way to kind of boost your funds and boost your collecting fund for your own personal means, for things that you prefer and things that you want to have. Now, do I recommend this? It really depends on who you are, because here's the sad fact of life, folks. Anytime you want to do something, it means you have to stop doing something else. And that's really the question you're going to want to have to ask yourself about this. Is reselling comics important enough to me to stop doing something else? Frankly, for me, it's kind of not. It's not really something I enjoyed doing. It's not really something I was excited about doing. Getting the payout was nice from it, but the amount of work and the headache that came with trying to do this all at once wasn't worth it to me. And I kept on researching to find other methods and other ideas. And so like for a long time, my mind, as far as comic books was concerned, was just associated with reselling, and I didn't like that mindset. I didn't like where it ultimately took me. It was nice being able to go to Comic-Con and not have to worry so much about the funds, but I don't know if this is something I would want to do with the same amount of energy that I had. Like I said, I'd probably only upload a couple here and there. If it was something that I had and didn't necessarily want, I might upload it. But as of right now, I think it's just something I'm going to have to be chill about. And if you're anything like that, if you'd rather, be doing something else, if you'd rather spend your free time working on, a personal project, or if you wanted to write your own comic, or if you wanted to pay attention to the comics you already have and already want, I would do that instead. So there you go, folks. That is what I learned with this whole Flips Out Challenge thing. Those are the points I learned about comic book reselling, the things I would do differently, and my recommendations as to who I think would really benefit from doing an exercise like this. So I'm very curious. Go ahead and tell me what your experience was like. Tell me some of the tips you have down in the comments below, because I'm really interested to hear what other people's experiences were. I found very precious few people who are actually reselling comic books and being successful at it. Most of them resold comics in conjunction with other stuff. So if that's something that you're doing, I would love to hear what your experience is like and what you're learning. As well as what your favorite ice cream flavor is. I would love to know what your favorite ice cream flavor is. That's important. And hey, until next time, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. And remember to always be your best self. Thank you so much for joining me on this little video here. I had a lot of fun learning all of this stuff, and I hope you did too. If you're interested into more like comic book reselling or want to see my experience, here's the playlist. And be sure to subscribe so that you can see more videos as they come out. Thanks again.